Okay. So Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Gita Gyan level 2. So please join me in our prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Bhakta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Jayatham Surato Pangur Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarvasva Padambojo Radha Madana Mohana Divyat Vrindaranya Kalpa Drumada Srimad Ratnagara Simhasanasto Srimad Radha Shri Govinda Deva Prestali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vikna Vinasha Narasimha Iti Namini Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayatim Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tat Sat. Okay, so Hare Krishna, everyone. So welcome back again to our Gita Gyan. So today we are going to go through the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, entitled Moksha Sanyasa Yoga, Conclusion, the Perfection of Renunciation. So you might be wondering what happened to the Gita Mahatmya. So actually, chapter 18 is quite a long chapter. And previously in level 1, we did it all in one day. So in level 2, so I was thinking I would split it into two parts. So the first section up to verses 48 around there, it's mainly continuation of what we have been discussing in chapter 17. And then the later verses from verse 50 something onwards, it goes into the conclusion. Krishna summarizes the entire Bhagavad Gita. So that part we will do tomorrow. And since that part will be a little shorter. So I was thinking I will do the Gita Mahatmya story tomorrow. And today we will concentrate more on the first part of the chapter 18, which is the longer part. So we can have more time. All right. So, but before that, I thought it will still be nice for me to start off with a simple story, a short story. So the story has something to do with this picture here. You can see this picture. This is very famous picture. Lord Krishna driving the chariot of Arjuna, right? And in this way, Krishna is called Partha Sarathi. Partha, Arjuna is also known as Partha because his mother is Kunti Devi. And Kunti Devi's another name is Pritha. And the son of Pritha is called Partha. And therefore, Arjuna is known as Partha. But Krishna is driving the chariot of Partha. And the charioteer is known as Sarathi. So therefore, Krishna's name is Partha Sarathi, the driver of the chariot of Krishna, of Arjuna. So isn't that a very curious thing for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to do, isn't it? Why would God, this is God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is serving Arjuna by driving his chariot. So the story I'm about to say has something to do with this picture. So there was once, this happened during about 500 plus years, around 500 years ago. This is the pastime, one of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The 500 years ago, the Lord appeared as an avatar, incarnation of Sri Krishna, and he came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in this way, he inaugurated the chanting of the holy names of the Lord all over India. So during this period, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he already became a sannyasi at that time, and he was traveling all over India. So during his travels, he came to South India. And in South India, he was going towards the world's largest temple, Sri Rangam at that time, Vaishnava temple. So he went to Sri Rangam, and in that area, he came across a brahmana. Now there was this brahmana. This brahmana had this brahmana is a very old brahmana who used to live there, and he was illiterate. He didn't know how to read or write. But nevertheless, he was very faithful and he was very pious, and he had a guru. And what he would do every day, he would take the Bhagavad Gita and he would look at the Bhagavad Gita and he would try to open the pages and he would try to just, he was already quite old. And at that time, it was not so easy for him to start learning literacy because the language was, Tamil in Sanskrit. These verses were all in Sanskrit and he could not really understand. But he would nevertheless, every day, he will take the book, Bhagavad Gita, and he with great faith and great attention, he will look at the picture of Bhagavad Gita like this. And then he would shed tears every day. But just by looking at the picture and looking at the book, somehow he will shed some tears. And the people who sometimes come and they will see this happening, and they will tell this old brahmana, hey, old brahmana, you don't know how to read, and yet you are every day I see you holding this Bhagavad Gita, and every day I sometimes see that you are shedding tears. So please tell me, what is the, but usually he will not tell anyone. And the people will also ask him in a way which is sometimes, not a very polite way. So they will sort of make fun of him. They will laugh at him. See, some of the brahmanas were very proud. So they will think, they will minimize this person. But once Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and he was passing by and he heard about this, and he was also passing by and he saw that this brahmana, this old brahmana, was looking at this Bhagavad Gita with great devotion. And then he asked, "Oh brahmana, what's happening? Why are you crying? I see that, I understand that you do not know how to read, but why are you then crying? Why are you shedding tears? Your tears also look genuine." So then the brahmana, for some reason, he was moved to answer. And he responded to this, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, saying that actually, I don't know how to read. But nevertheless, my Guru Maharaj, who is no longer with me now, and his last instruction before he left the planet was that I should always try to read the Bhagavad Gita. But I cannot read, and I wasted my time, wasted my life. Unfortunately, I was unable to learn up reading. But still, I have great faith with my Guru Maharaj, and I was thinking, somehow, at least let me just take this Bhagavad Gita and try to just do some kind of seva for my Guru Maharaj in terms of looking at this Bhagavad Gita. And he has heard, so sometimes he will hear the recitations of the Bhagavad Gita. And just by holding this Bhagavad Gita daily, he will try to remember the recitations that he has heard. You know, those days there were no MP3 or there was no YouTube, so it was difficult. And then sometimes they have to travel far away just to hear the Bhagavad Gita recitation. But he would try to remember them. And in this way, he would look. And sometimes when he says, he's very much moved to tears. So then he will say, though I cannot read, though I cannot write, but still, when I look at this picture, you know, the Bhagavad Gita's cover has this picture. And I have also heard how the story of how Krishna became the charioteer of Arjuna. Now, in those days, you know, the caste system was very prominent. And usually those who drive the chariot are of a lower caste. So they are considered Shudras. You know, the social distinction, Brahmanas, then Kshatriyas, then Vaishyas, then Shudras. But still, sometimes Kshatriyas will also learn the art of chariot driving, because sometimes the charioteer will get killed in the battle and they will sometimes need to drive. And in this way, Krishna knows, of course, Krishna is he was acting as a Kshatriya. So, and what happens was, in order to direct the charioteer, the person in the chariot, the Kshatriya, he has to, you know, very quickly, he has to say, turn right, turn left, or go slow, or go fast. So in the midst of battle, very clamorous and very loud, they don't have the time to say that. So sometimes you cannot hear. So what they used to do is that, you know, they will use to tap the charioteer with their feet. So in the midst of battle, they will quickly just nudge the charioteer with their feet, saying that turn right. You know, they will nudge on the right side and then they will turn right. They will nudge on the left side and then they will turn left. If they make a quick jab, that means go fast. If they just tap normally, that means, okay, just normal speed. So the feet of Arjuna used to tap on the shoulder of Krishna. And of course, to understand that here is the person, the Para Brahman, the greatest personality ever existed, and he's the one who created everything, right? And such a personality who even Lakshmi serves his lotus feet. And this Krishna is now sitting in this position, and Arjuna is tapping his feet on Krishna and then indicating to go left and right. So the Brahmana was saying, when I think the mercy of the Lord, how merciful is this Lord, that he has taken the role of a simple charioteer simply to please his devotees or simply to act certain, participate in certain leelas. Such a simple role he has taken, such a great personality, the greatest personality in the world, out of love for his devotees, has taken such a simple role. And when I see this picture and when I remember the great costless mercy of this Supreme Personality, I am moved to tears. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard that, he told the Brahmana, "O Brahmana, though you have not read the Bhagavad Gita, though you are illiterate, but you have understood the concept of Bhagavad Gita far better than many who have tried to read." So what he's trying to say, is that the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is basically Krishna, his devotees, and his instructions. So this is the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita. And ultimately, the main spirit here is Krishna. So if one can understand that Krishna is the goal, therefore in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a verse, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, Vasudeva Sarvam Mata, Vasudeva Sarvam Tyaga, Vasudeva Sarvam Kriya. So like that, it goes on. So basically what it means is, Vasudeva means the son of Vasudev, and Krishna is the son of Vasudev. And Krishna is everything. Vasudeva Sarvamata. Everything is Krishna. Vasudeva Sarva Kriya. All purifications are simply meant for Krishna. Vasudevam Sarvam Iti. Everything revolves around Krishna. So that, to understand that point, that is the heart of Bhagavad Gita. That's why, if you remember, chapter 4 has the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And there's one verse which summarizes the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The entire Bhagavad Gita is called the seed verse. So that's chapter 4, verse 20 something. I can't remember the verse number, but it's Janma Karma Chame Divyam. Janma Karma Chame Divyam. Janma Karma. What's the verse? Evam Yoveti Tatvataha. Tyaktva Deham Punarjanma. Naiti Mamiti. So Arjuna. Yes, that's the verse. So Janma Karma Chame Divyam. So Krishna says, if one can remember, if one knows that my Janma, birth, and my Karma, activities, Janma and Karma, my birth and my activities are not ordinary. Divyam, they are transcendental, they are beyond ordinary, they are spiritual. So if one knows this, then one will not take birth again in this world, because one will directly come to me. So that is the goal of this entire Bhagavad Gita, to know Janma, to know Krishna's Janma, Karma to be transcendental, Divyam. So therefore, this Brahmana, he has appreciated how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so merciful, and he's so loving to his pure devotees. It's kind of like something like, how it's normally a child is supposed to touch the feet of the parents, right? Generally, this is the culture in Hindu society, right? The child touches the feet of the parent and takes blessings. The parent doesn't touch the child's feet. And generally, it's considered very rude if somebody touches another person with the feet. So, accidentally they do it, they take obeisances. But when the child is born, when the child is very young, when the child is a baby, sometimes the parent will take the child and make the child stand on the head, and the feet of the child will touch the face of the parent. And sometimes the feet of the child will touch the face, the eyes, like that. So this is, what does that mean? Does that mean that the child is greater than the Lord? No. The child there is a beautiful relationship between that child and the parent, isn't it? Just out of love, that parent is willing to take that child, and it's just basically having a pastime, a leela. So in this way, the Supreme Lord is having a very wonderful relationship with his pure devotees. So these are the prema. These kind of devotees are not ordinary. They are prema. They are called prema bhaktas. They live and breathe only for the Lord's sake. It is said that when Arjuna sleeps, he is always, when he inhales, he will say Krish, and when he exhales, he will say Na. So like that, he is always chanting the names of the Lord. So that is the explanation, right? So this is the causeless mercy of the Lord. Though the Lord is so great, though the Lord is so wonderful, though the Lord is Prabhu, Mahaprabhu, Master, He's the master of everything, right? But yet, those pure devotees, and though the pure devotees are servants, though we are all servants, we are all dasa, right? Servants of the Lord. We are all created, we are all part and parcel of Him. So we are supposed to serve Him. But this relationship of master and servant is very different from what we understand as master and servant. In this material world, we all want to be master. We want to lord over something. We want to be the boss. That's why we came to this material world, because we don't have the service mentality. We have the lordship mentality. Someone should listen to me. So that mentality brought us to this material world. And we have this conception that everything is, master is better. To be servant is subservient. It's a very bad position. The master will ill-treat me. I don't want to do what the master does. But in the spiritual world is very different. It is the servants who get more pleasure from serving the master. So that is the mood in the spiritual worlds. That's the difference, the fundamental difference between spiritual world and material world. The spirit of service attitude. There is no selfishness. There is no lust. So there is only service. And simply by doing this service, they get so much of it's eternal bliss. So they get that kind of pleasure out of this. And to show that appreciation, to show that mood, this is one of the main reasons. In fact, this is the main reason why the Lord comes to earth. He comes to earth for many reasons, right? The Sarva Dharma Parityagya, that particular verse, it says, to Duskritam, to destroy, to kill the miscreants. So, but if the Lord wants to kill demons, He doesn't have to come down personally. He just have to give them a heart attack, or some kind of aneurysm, something like that. And that's sufficient. There are many, many ways one can kill a person. So the Lord, to kill demons is just an external reason. And to re-establish Dharma, okay, that He takes it personally because He wants to re-establish Dharma. But actually the main reason He comes is to give a preview of the spiritual world, to give a preview of the type of relationship one can have with Him in the spiritual world. So therefore He comes, He enacts His pastimes. He came as Ramachandra, and He enacted very beautiful pastimes between between Himself and His mother and His father and His brothers. Such wonderful, sweet relationship going on in Ayodhya. In the Balakanda is very beautifully described, how the mothers will be so affectionate towards Lord Ram. And then how, in marriage between Sita Devi and Lord Krishna, Lord Ramachandra, such beautiful, and between His servants, so many servants, right? There is the boatman, there is the ministers, there are so many of them, and Lakshman himself served as a great servant, Hanuman. So what kind of sweet relationship the Lord had with all these devotees. So when we hear these pastimes, what happens? When we hear the beauty of the Lord's relationship, how sweetly and how beautifully the Lord reciprocates with His devotees. What happens? Number one, many things happens in our heart. Number one, because it is Shravanam, the process of hearing. So our impurities get destroyed. Our ill feelings start to go away. our heart gets cleansed. And at the same time, there is also love, which is the seeds of love, which is planted in our heart. So what happens is, the more we hear, the more the seeds of love they grow. So in this way, it awakens our natural affection to the Lord. And we start thinking of him. We start hearing about him. What a great personality. If only I can have this kind of relationship with him. So in this way, the Lord creates a preview. Just like when we want to watch a movie, usually before we watch the movie, we want to see how the movie is, right? So there's a preview. Or before we go to a holiday destination, we want to see what kind of destination it is. We look at the pamphlets, we look at the YouTube or website, we see what it's there. So in the same way, Krishna is inviting all of us back to the spiritual world. But the only thing that is blocking us from going back to the spiritual world is our desire. We don't desire it. Because spiritual world means Krishna consciousness. It means direct service to the Lord. And we think service is bad. I want to be master. I don't want to be servant. And therefore I'm here. And while I'm here, I'm trapped by karma. And in this way, I am going, facing my reactions, good and bad reactions. But if we can develop that desire to attain Krishna, that desire is which is going to bring us back to the spiritual world. But that's not an ordinary desire. It cannot be just artificially created. That desire has to start by Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, the process of hearing, the process of chanting. So as we chant, as we hear, we chant. As we chant, more we want to hear. As we hear more, our faith in chanting increases even more. And then as we chant more we want to hear. And in this way, remembrance also will come automatically. And we will develop what is called laulyam. Laulyam is a Sanskrit word which is described in the Nectar of Devotion. It talks about greed. It's another word for greed, but this is not ordinary greed. This greed, ordinary greed is called lobha. Now that one is one of the gates of hell. It brings us towards horrible destinations. But this greed is called laulyam. And this laulyam is intense greed to attain Krishna's lotus feet. Is to intense greed for spiritual agyata sukriti, intense greed to have something to do with Krishna. So that greed will propel us to do everything and everything for the pleasure of Krishna. And that will further purify us, and that will further increase our greed until it comes to the highest level, which is called the highest level of love. You know, love has many stages. There are 9 stages of love described. So it's a very technical subject matter. But generally, you know, there are certain levels of love. First, love, the love has to start as a seed of love. The guru or the pure devotee of the Lord plants this seed of love for Krishna in our heart. And as we water that seed, right, with the water of chanting and hearing and smaranam, the 9 processes of bhakti, as we water that seed, the seed grows, and then it eventually comes to a certain level called ruchi. Ruchi means taste develops. We start developing a taste for spiritual activity, for hearing, for chanting. So when that taste develops, then the taste intensifies and it becomes sweeter and sweeter until you feel more and more you want to do this and you don't want to do other things. Your material desires will all drop away and your spiritual desires will increase. What is spiritual desire? To serve the Lord and his devotees, to hear more about the Lord, to chant more the names of Lord. So this desire will increase more and more and more. And then the next stage called bhava. Bhava is very, very intense mood that develops. And when bhava develops, ecstasy appears in our body. our hair will stand on end, and tears will pour from our eyes. And just by hearing the name of Krishna, so many wonderful symptoms. One will become stunned. Sometimes they will roll on the ground in ecstasy, tears flowing. So this is bhava. And when bhava becomes constant, then it becomes prema. So prema bhakti is the highest stage of bhakti. So when this kind of bhakti will bring us directly, propel us, it will destroy all the what do you call the impurities, the impure desires, and it will bring us back to the lotus feet of the Lord and place us in a very special situation. So that is the idea behind this. So in Bhagavad Gita, we find nowadays many different versions of Bhagavad Gita. There are hundreds of versions of Bhagavad Gita. But if you see most of these versions of Bhagavad Gita, they will take away Krishna. They will not talk about Krishna. They will completely remove Krishna, and they will try to present their own philosophy, packaged it in a certain way. They will try to explain away the direct Sanskrit translation. So when Krishna says me, some people will say, oh, Krishna is not saying me. Krishna is saying the person inside me. So like that they will say. When I say you, I'm not saying you. I'm talking about the person inside you. So this kind of interpretations, which are not directly linked to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's designed to take away the devotion and to only use the Bhagavad Gita as a tool to push their own agenda. So this has been happening around the world. So that's why Srila Prabhupada presented Bhagavad Gita as it is, as described by the Lord himself, no motivated interpretations, right? And this brahmana, this blind brahmana, coming back to our story, this blind brahmana, this illiterate brahmana, he got straight into the heart by the mercy of his guru, because he was so determined to carry out the instruction of his guru. Every day, without fail, he will perform his sadhana. By the mercy of the guru, he was able to understand the heart of the Bhagavad Gita, which is devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's why this picture is very special picture. It shows this picture. Whenever we see this picture, we must always remember the special, wonderful, beautiful mercy of the Lord. How the Lord, though he is Lord and Master, how he takes wonderful positions just to have beautiful relationships with his devotees. So this is our merciful Lord. Okay, so now that's the story. We will continue with our chapter 18. So chapter 18 is called Moksha Sanyasa Yoga. So before I explain this point about the meaning of this Moksha Sanyasa Yoga, it's helpful if we can recap briefly the last few chapters that we have covered. So if you remember that in the earlier chapters, we had chapters, as we mentioned before, last session also I mentioned, Bhagavad Gita can be looked at from 3 different sections. So the first section is chapters 1 to 6. 18 chapters altogether, right? So we can divide them into 3. 1 to 6, chapters 1 to 6, the first part, chapters 7 to 12, the second part, and chapters 13 to 18, the third part. So chapter 1 to 6 is basically setting the direction for the jiva. Yes, we are all now in this material world. What to do? We are lost. We are confused. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, take up yoga. Take the Nivritti Marga, the path of renunciation, the path of yoga. Become a yogi in all circumstances. This will help you. And then in the path of yoga, Krishna talks about how there are two paths within the yoga path itself. There is the jnana path and there is the bhakti path. So he will initially describe the jnana path in detail. And though he describes the jnana path in detail, starting from karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, at each point towards the end of the chapter, he will always mention also the bhakti path. So he will indicate, like for example, in karma yoga, he will say, okay, perform your duty, do it for duty's sake. So he will talk a lot of details on that. But towards the end, he will say, but Arjuna, do it for me. So he will indicate bhakti. And he will say, this is better than simply doing it for duty. So like that, in Jnana Yoga, chapter 4, he will do the same thing also. He will talk about knowledge, and then he will say, but he will start telling, but you should understand the goal of knowledge, Jnayam. The goal of knowledge is Krishna. So therefore, he gives the verse, Janma Karma Chami Dipya. And in this way, he will describe about himself as the goal of knowledge. And then like that, he goes on, even in Dhyana Yoga, meditation and all that, ultimately he will say, the goal of meditation is to realize Paramatma in the heart. And that Paramatma is me, Krishna will say to Arjuna. And then he will say, and once you realize me as the Paramatma, you will want to develop service. You want to develop bhakti. And then in this way, you can come back to me. So Krishna will always indicate bhakti briefly in the first 6 chapters. So it's basically, the point here is to become a yogi. Whether you want to become jnana yogi or you want to become bhakti yogi, both paths are available. And Krishna later in chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 and 12, Krishna will abandon the jnana path and he will fully focus on the bhakti path. He will start telling all about himself. He will start telling the glories of bhakti. And then Arjuna will ask in chapter 12, you have given me 2 paths. Which is better? Tell me for certain. And Krishna, he has told many times already, but here Arjuna is for the benefit of all humanity, he is giving a very clear question so that people cannot misunderstand. So then Krishna will say very clearly, both paths are good for liberation, but of the 2, the bhakti path is better, far better. And why? Because it is easier, it is less troublesome, it has my direct mercy, and it is happily done. Whereas the other path is very troublesome. There is no happiness in it. Here, this path is happily done. So, and in this way, Krishna will describe bhakti. But from chapters 13 to 14 onwards, Krishna will give further details about our position, the position of the jiva, the position of the material creation, how all these things came about, ultimately with the goal of saying that ultimately everything comes from me only. So he is further re-establishing the point about how he is the supreme and how we are all part and parcel of him and how all this material creation only is coming from him, right? So we have that. So in this way, he is giving further details. So these are basically details, chapters 13 all the way to 17. And it talks in detail about the 3 modes, the nature of material creation, how it works, what traps us here, what are the activities of karma, which are like the banyan tree, is going on, ever exists, going on and on. How does it work? How do we get out of it? And he gives practical instructions, how the 3 modes of nature work, what we should do, what we should avoid, what kind of food we should eat, what kind of activity we should perform, what is the nature of the mode of goodness, the nature of the mode of passion. So these things are more practical. So the compass and the direction is already set. Now he gives more practical discussion from chapters 13 all the way to 17. So chapter 13, so I want to just quickly recap the chapters 13 all the way to 17. so that we can understand the flow of what happens when it comes to chapter 18. So the conditioned jivas, they have come to this material world to try to lord over matter away from the spiritual abode. So when that happens, we become conditioned because we are spirit. Material world is matter. When spirit enters into matter, it becomes conditioned. Just like rain, earth. When rain touches the earth, the rain becomes conditioned. It becomes muddy, right? So this mud, this conditioning of mud is the three modes of nature, which keeps us within this. And these three modes of nature is called guna. Guna means modes. Guna can also mean rope. So these three ropes are tying us down in this material world. And as we traverse this material world, and the nature of the material world, the Prakriti, the Mahatattva, all this is described in chapter 14. And as we become conditioned, chapter 15 will talk about our activities. As the jivas get conditioned in this material world, what are the activities we perform? So our activities are like the banyan tree. This is called the tree of karma. So it is endless. It goes on and on. The roots branching upwards, downwards, and many, many twigs, many, many fruits of our karma. So we are going on and on endlessly experiencing this. So this is our activities, bound by the three modes of nature within this material creation. How do we break free? So Krishna gives the weapon. He says you have to use the axe of knowledge and detachment. So knowledge and detachment, in this way, why detachment? Because remember what I mentioned earlier, we have to develop the desire to go back to the spiritual world. We cannot go back to the spiritual world so long as we are attached to this material world. But it sounds very difficult how to detach from the material world. The jnana method is mechanically detached from the material world. They will perform meditation, they will go seclusion, they will leave everything, and they will go forcefully, they will bring their attachment to zero. So that's a very difficult thing to do. Whereas the bhakti method is very simple. He said Krishna and Krishna's activities are introduced right from the beginning, and the devotee is given a taste of a higher taste. You know, if somebody is addicted to something which is, like, for example, you know, someone is addicted to very bad food, so low quality food, or, you know, canned food or things which are processed. But if somebody is willing to cook for that person and take the best of ingredients and offer that food to the Lord, and then with love, somebody cooks the food for you, it's very different compared to the food we eat in the restaurant, right? If somebody cooks the food with love, they will take the best of ingredients, they will try their best to make it for you, and you can tangibly taste that, and we can get the benefit, the consciousness. It's very nourishing for the person. So this is the difference. So therefore, if we begin to develop attachment to Krishna Prasadam, to Krishna's chanting, to Krishna's anything to do with Krishna, right? So then we will slowly lose taste for our material attachments. So that's how devotees become, they let go so many terrible things. How are devotees able to let go gambling, meat eating, intoxication, illicit sexual activity, and all these terrible things? Because we try to develop attachment for a higher taste. So it's like we don't bring our desires to zero. We simply change our desire from something lower to something higher. So therefore, you know, desires is very difficult to bring it to zero. So, whereas this process of simply switching it makes it very, very easy. So one is able to quickly attach oneself, just like when we buy a new car. when we buy a new car, are we going to be attached to our old car? Let's say the car is 20 years. It's some kind of nostalgia. Oh, this was the car I went out with my wife first time or something like that. Okay, all that nostalgia and everything. But most of the time, people, when they get a new car, they won't think twice to sell the old car. So Prabhupada sometimes tells us, we should renounce the material world just like how we renounce the toilet. We enter the toilet for a purpose. We don't enter the toilet because we enjoy the toilet. We don't enter the toilet because we want to, it is for a purpose. We do it, we enter the toilet, but the moment we are done using the toilet, do we want to linger? Do we want to stay there and enjoy the beautiful new tiles which I've put? Or no, we want to leave the toilet. So we renounce it. So in the same way, Bhakti Yoga, that's the mentality. Because we have a higher place to go. So we want to leave the toilet because we want to go to somewhere better. And that place we know. So therefore, Bhakti Yoga is like that. So we can easily, with the weapon of knowledge of the higher taste, knowledge of a higher goal, knowledge of a higher purpose, very easily we can detach and cut off this tree of karma. So this is karma. Cuts off the tree of karma. And what happens? So as chapter 15 talks about karma and chopping off the tree and everything, Arjuna in between, he asks one question, right? There are two types. How many types of people are there? Like you talked about the three modes, right? But there are also people who are trying to do good, who are also people who are trying to do bad. So therefore, Krishna will say, amongst the conditioned souls, there are two types. Yes, one is Sura, the godly or the divine nature, which is described in chapter 16. And the other is the Asura. And the Asura is described in chapter 17. Remember this part about the Asura, how the demonic natured people think, right? So this is clearly distinguished, right? So that we can understand what are good qualities and what are bad qualities. So this distinction has to be given by God. Otherwise, we will manufacture our own things. So that is not dharma. So it has to come from God. So this is there. And amongst those who are trying to be divine, they are trying to follow the Lord's orders, the theists, the suras, right? We can divide them further into two parts. Those who are subservient to God, they don't dare to cross God. They follow the rules and regulations as set by the Lord. They're trying to be divine, trying to follow be good and everything. Okay. But at the same time, they have desires, material desires. They are still not free. They are not detached yet. They have material desires. And at the same time, they don't have knowledge about going back to the spiritual world. They don't have knowledge of higher things. So what they want to do, they have desires. So the Lord gives them yagyas, sacrifices, and different sacrifices which one can perform to attain their desire. So this is predominantly 70% of what is given in the Vedas, because people's desires are very, very big. Many desires, endless desires. So to attain all these endless desires, there are many rituals and samskaras and yagyas which are given for the attainment of those desires, which are done legally, lawfully. So one doesn't get papa or sin otherwise, right? So in this way, like for example, getting married. So instead of having illicit affairs, if one is interested, then get married, at least legalize it. So that's the idea behind. So this is, marriage is a samskara, vivaha samskara, given by God, right? So some sacrifice is given, because when marriage is there, one agrees not to have many wives or many husbands, or to have illicit affairs. one agrees to be responsible and have a house to bring up the children. So be a parent. So a role in society. So that is sacrifice, which is needed to balance the sense gratification a householder is bound to get. So that is karma kanda, the path of pavarga marga. Pravarga marga, or the path of fruitive action, that is karma. But this one, slowly, it will purify us after many births. Because simply by performing the activities given in the Vedas, we get some purification. But it's very slow. And it takes many lifetimes, eventually, until one comes to a point where he loses taste for all these things. And he starts to look at something higher, about trying to see, is there a way I can end this cycle of birth and death? So to come to that point, it takes many evolutions of lifetimes in this path. The Asura cannot even approach this path. He will only go down to hell, further, lower and lower, and takes lower species and never get a chance to be linked to the Vedic scriptures. That is the Asuric mentality. Okay, but this karma kanda, it cannot bring us liberation. It's very slow. The purification is very slow. So chapter 17 talks about the karmi also. And Krishna will tell, since in the beginning itself, Krishna told Arjuna in chapter 2 also, Krishna told Arjuna, become a yogi. So the Sura who is interested in liberation and going beyond the cycle of birth and death, he will not take up the karmi path. This karmi path is called pravritti marga. Marga means the path of sense gratification, of gaining, of getting things. This is to satisfy our material senses legally and at the same time get the blessings of the Lord, and in this way slowly make progress. Because not everybody is able to detach. Not everybody is come to a evolution of one's consciousness where they want to end the cycle of birth and death. So therefore, this is given for the rest of the population. So therefore, Krishna says, right, in chapter 17:28, at the one of the later verses, anything done as sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, is impermanent. So Krishna is trying to inject faith for the Supreme in these karma kanda activities. So Krishna is telling, better if you're going to do these karma kanda activities, if you're going to do these rituals, better do it with faith. Because if you do it without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, that is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. So Krishna mentions this in chapter 17. So we will show you the link to chapter 18 eventually from this verse. And therefore Krishna is, in other words, trying to indicate to Arjuna again, leave this path of pravritti marga, this karma kanda, this path of sacrifice, charity and penance. You still continue the sacrifice, charity and penance. But Krishna is saying, do it without expectation of fruits. So he is introducing yoga into the aspect. He says, do all these activities, don't let go, right? As long as you are in that particular situation, you do it. You're not asking everybody to become sannyasi. No, we have to do, but do it with, as long as we can, do it with the mood of doing it for Krishna's pleasure. So that is even better. That is yoga in towards bhakti. So Krishna says, do those activities, do your duties, but do it for my pleasure, right? So he's telling, be a yogi, and this detail of how to be a yogi is described in chapter 18 even more. Details are given how to actually practice this yoga path, the path of the spiritualist, which is called also the nivritti marga. Nivritti is the opposite of pravritti. Pravritti means is to get. I want. Nivritti is I don't want. So that is the difference. Pravritti and nivritti. We want to, this is the path of detachment, the path of renunciation. But there are two types of renunciation. One is the renunciation of the Jnana Marga. Remember chapter 8, chapter 6, chapter 6, chapter 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, and 6. These are all Jnana Marga, where Krishna will say, you want to do meditation, you need to go to a secluded, sacred place, sit on a asan, which is made out of deer skin and a soft cloth, and then sit neither too high, neither too low, and then practice celibacy, no sexual activity at all, away from all social disturbances. You've completely, in a secluded cave or a place like that, and then perform the yoga posture so that you can sit undisturbed. And then with practicing of the breath, you can try to mechanically control the mind, and then in this way concentrate, learn the art of concentration. And then once your concentration has reached a certain level, then you concentrate on the tip of your nose, and in this way you will eventually develop you will develop inner search. You will start searching within your heart, and the Paramatma will eventually be revealed. So that's the Jnana Marga. It's very difficult to do. Artificially, we break off everything, we go and we perform these activities. It's hard. And it's not recommended by Krishna here. So he says, instead, do Bhakti Marga. So this is even better. Don't let go your duties, don't let go your activities. Instead, do it for my pleasure. And eventually, when you get the chance, when you are able to retire, dedicate yourself fully to my service. So that in this way, one can develop Bhakti Marga. It's much easier to attain. So that detail will be given in chapter 18. Chapter 18 will talk in detail about the Nivritti Marga. So this is the progression of the chapters. So chapter 17 talks more about the Pravritti Marga, the activities in the three modes, right? But chapter 18, the difference between chapter 17 and chapter 18 is chapter 18 is now focusing on the yogi path, no longer on the Pravritti Marga aspect. So this is a very important chapter. So that's why it's also called Moksha Sanyasa Yoga. So Sanyasa means renouncing activities. Moksha means liberation. The yoga which can give us liberation. So Sanyasa